The private jet money pit, dream or nightmare? A new private jet taxis slowly onto the runway. Inside the cabin, there are plush leather seats and a private chef prepares dinner mid-flight. It looks like the epitome of true freedom, but just a few months later, the owner gets the bill. Maintaining the aircraft costs $200,000 per month, even if it barely leaves the ground. The owner must cover pilot salaries, hangar rent, insurance, and the continuous costs of keeping the plane airworthy. In the beginning, they try to ignore the expenses. Then, they start flying less frequently. Next, they attempt to charter the plane to recoup at least a fraction of the money. Finally, sometime later, they put it up for sale. But it turns out that selling a private jet is much harder than buying it. The problem is that an aircraft costing tens of millions of dollars quickly turns into an expensive financial black hole. It keeps draining money every single month, even when sitting idle in a hangar. Some millionaires lose $1 to $2 million a year on their planes. The most surprising part? Many only realize the true cost after making the purchase. Why does owning a private jet become an expensive financial nightmare instead of a symbol of success? Let's break it down. The illusion of prestige and aviation marketing. The idea of owning a private aircraft often sparks in the minds of successful entrepreneurs long before their bank accounts hold the tens of millions required to sustain it. In the corporate world, private aviation is marketed as the ultimate evolution of personal comfort and prestige. Glossy brochures from top aerospace manufacturers and seductive presentations at prestigious air shows in Geneva or Orlando paint an ideal picture of absolute independence. Professional brokers repeat the tireless mantra that time is money and that buying a business jet is not an extravagance, but a strategic investment in personal efficiency. The buyer goes to sleep dreaming of forever forgetting stuffy commercial terminals, security lines, and rigid flight schedules. The private jet is sold to them as a cozy, high-altitude office where multi-million-dollar contracts are signed over crystal flutes of champagne. However, behind this dazzling facade lies an incredibly complex industry governed by brutal laws. The harsh reality of logistics and empty legs. Most first-time buyers view an aircraft through the lens of owning supercars or luxury yachts. They assume a plane is simply a very fast, high-tech car that only requires fuel and periodic service visits. This illusion is where future financial disasters take root. An aircraft does not forgive amateurism. Within the first week of real-world operations, it can transform an ambitious dream into an endless nightmare. Where the owner expected seamless travel, they find a ruthless desert of aviation bureaucracy and logistical headaches. A private jet is not just a vehicle, it is a mini airline trapped in a web of strict international regulations. The first thing an owner learns is that you cannot just fly wherever you want, whenever you want. Every single flight requires prior airspace authorization, securing takeoff and landing slots at congested airports, strict coordination with ground handling services. Trying to fly to an urgent meeting in London or Paris during peak season can fail simply because the local airport denies parking due to zero availability. The owner is forced to accept that their multi-million-dollar toy must sit at an airfield dozens of miles away from their actual destination, forcing them to commute into the city in a regular taxi. An even harsher reality is the issue of empty flights, known in the industry as empty legs. If the owner needs a one-way flight, the aircraft must either return to its home base empty or fly without passengers to its next assignment. Roughly 30% of all private aviation flights are flown completely empty. In these cases, the owner still pays the full operating cost per hour, including expensive jet fuel, landing fees, and crew salaries. The financial drain: fixed versus variable costs. Aviation expenses are split into two bottomless categories, fixed and variable, and either one is capable of destabilizing a highly successful business. Fixed costs, paid 24/7, 365 days a year. Whether the plane is flying high or sitting lonely in a hangar, these bills never stop coming. The crew. Finding top-tier pilots is incredibly difficult. Their annual salaries reach hundreds of thousands of dollars, and mandatory simulator training at specialized centers like flight safety costs tens of thousands of dollars twice a year. Hangarage and insurance. renting space at a prominent airport and paying annual insurance premiums, which are calculated at maximum rates for new owners. Navigation. Constant updates to navigation databases, such as those provided by yPurchasing. Variable costs, incurred every time the engines start. Fuel. Aviation fuel costs a fortune, and voracious turbines burn hundreds of gallons per hour. Ground handling. Landing at any international airport comes with staggering invoices from fixed-base operators, FBOs, for ground handling. Hourly maintenance programs. The most insidious expenses are mandatory hourly maintenance contributions for the engines and airframe, managed through programs like Rolls-Royce Corporate Care or Honeywell MSP. For every hour the engines run, the owner must transfer hundreds of dollars into escrow accounts for future overhauls. Refusing to join these programs instantly destroys the jet's resale value on the secondary market. The used jet trap. In an attempt to minimize massive upfront costs, many novice millionaires make a fatal mistake, buying a used aircraft at a temptingly low price. On the pre-owned market, one can find luxurious-looking Gulfstream or Challenger jets built in the late 90s for the price of a modest one-bedroom apartment in New York. To the buyer, it looks like the deal of the century. They just bought an intercontinental jet for a fraction of its original price. However, beneath the cheap price tag lies a mechanical time bomb. Aviation dictates a strict schedule of mandatory inspections tied to calendar time and flight hours. The most terrifying of these are heavy maintenance checks, known as the C-check and D-check. These inspections require stripping the entire interior, removing the engines, and scanning the airframe for microfractures and corrosion. The cost of a heavy check on an older aircraft can easily hit $1 to $2 million, frequently exceeding half the actual market value of the entire plane. To avoid financial ruin, owners often make a second strategic error. They hand the aircraft over to a management company to put it up for charter under Part 135 regulations. They are promised that charter revenue from third parties will entirely cover maintenance costs. The brutal reality is that heavy charter use wears out the aircraft exponentially. The interior quickly loses its luster, engines burn through their remaining flight hours, and the management company eats up most of the profit through various administrative fees and commissions. The owner is left with a worn-out plane that demands non-stop repairs, legal troubles, reputation, and flight shaming. The moment a tail number is registered to a jet, the owner is placed under a microscope by both regulatory bodies and the public. Corporate backlash. Within a corporate structure, owning a jet often sparks fierce resistance from minority shareholders and board members. Using company funds to fly the CEO to luxury resorts in Saint-Tropez or Aspen frequently results in high-profile lawsuits and accusations of asset mismanagement. Tax audits. Tax authorities, like the IRS, scrutinize any attempt to write off aircraft maintenance under accelerated depreciation rules, demanding meticulous proof that every single flight was strictly for business. Offshore structuring. Internationally, owners must navigate complex offshore registries like the Isle of Man, San Marino, or the Cayman Islands to optimize value-added tax, VAT, when importing aircraft into Europe. A single change in tax legislation can instantly render a structure illegal, resulting in massive fines or a seizure. Flight shaming. Today, owners face the cultural phenomenon of flight shaming. Environmental activists deploy bots on social media to track private jets in real time, publicly exposing millionaires for their massive carbon footprints and causing severe reputational damage to their primary businesses. The drama of the sale and family crises. The most dramatic phase of jet ownership occurs when the initial euphoria completely fades, replaced by cold math and the realization of a massive mistake. The owner makes the painful decision to cut their losses and list the aircraft for sale, hoping to recover at least some capital. This is where the cruelest disappointment awaits. Unlike luxury real estate, a private jet is a rapidly depreciating asset. A brand new jet loses 20% to 30% of its value the exact moment it rolls off the factory line and makes its delivery flight. By the end of the third year of operation, that loss can skyrocket to 40% or 50%. The market is regularly flooded with an excess of inventory, worsened by white tails, brand new planes built by manufacturers without a pre-existing order, which are sold at massive discounts, crushing the used market. Selling a business jet becomes a long, agonizing ordeal, taking an average of 9 to 12 months. Throughout this entire period, the owner must keep paying all fixed costs: hangar rent, insurance, pilot salaries, and maintenance programs, just to keep the plane legally airworthy for potential buyers. Trying to mothball the plane during the sale backfires, as buyers will demand massive discounts to perform highly complex pre-buy inspections. The owner is trapped. The aircraft continues to bleed hundreds of thousands of dollars every month while its market value plunges. This financial pressure creates immense psychological strain. In ultra-wealthy circles, admitting you can no longer afford your jet is social and reputational suicide. Owners hide their financial distress until the final hour, taking out fresh loans or draining vital capital from their core businesses to pay the aviation bills. This triggers what psychologists call luxury hostage syndrome, where an individual sacrifices their actual business empire just to maintain a wealthy image. This stubbornness inevitably leads to severe clinical depression, insomnia, and panic attacks as the first of the month approaches. The damage ripples through the family dynamic. Constant financial stress breeds deep domestic distrust. Spouses, accustomed to limitless luxury, often refuse to understand why the family budget is suddenly collapsing just to maintain a plane that spends 95% of its time gathering dust in a hangar. The humiliating climax: repossession. When the point of no return is crossed, the final act arrives: the compulsory seizure of assets, known in the industry as repossession. The bank's repossession of an aircraft is almost always designed to be highly public and humiliating. Imagine the scene. An entrepreneur arrives at the airport with important business partners or family, planning to board a flight. Right at the steps of the plane, they are met by financial institution representatives holding a repossession order. The aircraft is locked and grounded right in front of everyone, and the pilots are ordered to step down. The news spreads instantly through business circles, obliterating whatever remained of the owner's reputation. When an economic recession hits, the plane becomes a massive anchor that drags the owner's entire financial empire to the bottom. Banks ruthlessly initiate bankruptcy proceedings, and yesterday's high flyer watches in horror as bailiffs chain their jet to the tarmac. Many former owners openly admit that the happiest day of their aviation life was the day they bought the jet, and the second happiest day was the day they finally sold it at a monumental loss, freeing themselves from a suffocating financial cage. How to use business aviation wisely. Private aviation is not inherently evil. It can be an incredibly potent tool for business if utilized correctly, without the toxic urge to physically own the metal. Pragmatic, truly successful entrepreneurs figured out long ago that owning a plane and flying in one are completely separate concepts. For anyone whose annual flight time is under 150 to 200 hours, buying an aircraft makes zero financial sense. Instead, they leverage much more flexible, secure alternative models. Fractional ownership. Pioneered by companies like NetJets, by purchasing a share or fraction of an aircraft, the entrepreneur gets guaranteed access to a massive global fleet of hundreds of jets anywhere in the world, without ever worrying about hiring crews, maintenance management, or hangar space. Jet cards. These allow buyers to pre-purchase a fixed block of flight hours on a specific class of aircraft. This allows for precise travel budgeting with zero hidden fees, zero management stress, and zero asset depreciation risk. On-demand charter. The traditional pay-as-you-go model, which remains the ideal choice for irregular or sporadic travelers. The smart investor understands that true luxury and freedom do not mean having your name painted on the side of a plane. True freedom is the ability to call up a flawless, top-tier service exactly when you need it, while keeping your core wealth completely safe and secure on the ground.